2 Corinthians chapter 6. We are talking about relational readiness, from friendship to fiancés to family. And that is a journey, to start out friends and end up family. And the vehicle that takes you there is called marriage. Last time, we concluded by saying that marriage is a relationship where you don't belong to each other, but with each other. Some people are scared off by the idea of marriage, that they're going to be signing their life away and it's going to be an unhappy prospect. And there is a sense in which you do give your life to that other person, but it's not so much about belonging to the other person, it's about belonging with the other person. Instead of going through life alone, you decide to do life together. And they interviewed some 8 to 10-year-old kids to get their views on marriage. And they had some interesting perspectives. Like they asked, how do you decide whom to marry? Alan, age 10, says, you got to find somebody who likes the same stuff. Like, if you like sports, she should like it that you like sports, and she should keep the chips and dip coming. Kirsten weighs in. She says, no person really decides before they grow up who they're going to marry. God decides it all way before, and you get to find out later who you're stuck with. They asked these kids, how can a stranger tell if two people are married? You might have to guess based on whether they seem to be yelling at the same kids. What do you think your mom and dad have in common? They both don't want any more kids. See, there is some common ground there that you can find. What do most people do on a date? Well, dates are for having fun, and people should use them to get to know each other. Even boys have something to say if you listen long enough. On the first date, they just tell each other lies, and that usually gets them interested enough to go for a second date. What would you do on a first date that was turning sour? I'd run home and play dead. The next day I would call all the newspapers and make sure they wrote about me in all the dead columns. See, guys can get pretty creative when they need to. Is it better to be single or married? Well, it's better for girls to be single, but not for boys. Boys need someone to clean up after them. How would you make a marriage work? Tell your wife that she looks pretty, even if she looks like a truck. You know, through the eyes of kids, marriage looks like a lot of things. But as we saw last time, the most basic reason for marriage is friendship. Once you make the decision to go through life with someone else, the question then becomes, how will I know when I've found that person? How do we know if we're right for each other? The Bible says you'll know if you're right for each other if you'll explore these 3 compatibilities. The first compatibility is spiritual compatibility. 2 Corinthians 6 says, don't be yoked together with unbelievers. For what do righteousness and wickedness have in common, or what fellowship can light have with darkness? You don't want one of you in the light, the other one in the dark. You don't want to have these 2 entities coming together, yoked, harnessed as one unit, but have one pulling one way and the other pulling the other way. The most basic and fundamental compatibility that you need is spiritual compatibility. Which means I think that you need to ask 2 questions of somebody that you're dating, somebody that you might be interested in becoming engaged with. First, do they share your faith? But the second question that I find as just as important is, do they share your commitment to your faith? Because sometimes a person will say, oh yeah, when I was 6 years old, I remember praying a prayer in the church that I was brought up in, and absolutely I'm with the program. And you're getting up every morning and first thought on your mind is, God, I'm yours. This is your day. I want to bring honor to you. I want to live the life you want me to live. The last prayer at night as you lay your head on the pillow is, God, I just want to glorify you. Those are prayers you're praying today. Now that person told you about a prayer they prayed 30 years ago. But what about today? Do they share your faith, and do they share your commitment to your faith? Jesus said, you can't have any other gods before me. Really what you're looking for is someone who doesn't love you most of all. You're looking for somebody who loves God most of all and loves you second. That's spiritual compatibility. Second compatibility we need is emotional compatibility. 1 Peter 4 says, above all, love each other deeply, because love covers over a multitude of sins. There are all kinds of rough edges in a relationship, but you know, if there's emotional connection, it'll get you through. And they've done a lot of studies now about emotional intelligence, EQ, as opposed to IQ. And one of the words they've surfaced in the studies of emotional intelligence is this word resonance. Resonance is the reinforcement or prolongation of sound by reflection. When something's resonant, it just kind of rings out. They're kind of taking this metaphor of sound waves and applying it to relational waves, that when there's resonance, we just connect. There's less static in the relationship. There's less noise, more signal, less noise. You can read resonance in people's eyes. They're engaged. Their eyes light up. So if you're out on a date with someone and they're kind of slumping over like this, it's not a good sign. You might not have resonance there. Laughter and the artful use of humor typifies effective resonance. Laughter is the shortest distance between two people. And in studies they've shown of couples that just emotionally engage well with each other, there's lots of laughter, not just ha-ha-ha's, but you know, just little chuckles, and it just symbolizes a comfort, a relaxation, feeling safe with each other, and that emotional compatibility we need. Now, we typically start out with a certain amount of this. In fact, there's really 3 phases that relationships will go through. And the first phase is what we might call intimacy. This is the romance stage where we're into each other. We can't wait to be with the person. It's blue sky every day. We're just loving being with this person. And that's usually the first stage. Maybe it's even the honeymoon phase of the relationship. Then the next stage that we encounter is conflict. And now the emotion's not all positive. But that emotion, that conflict, those hard things, can, if we handle them well, push us back into intimacy. We can resolve it, we can work through it, and the intimacy that we had before, even though it's been tested now, it can push us back now into greater intimacy, greater enjoyment of each other. But if we don't handle the conflict well, it pushes us into the third phase, which is withdrawal. The conflicts hurt us. It hasn't been resolved. We feel the pain. That person's been part of that pain, so we kind of move away from that person. Maybe we're living in the same house still, but they've got their life and I've kind of got my life, and really we're not living life with each other, just under the same roof, but separate from each other. We've withdrawn. The most dangerous of these phases is this third phase. The conflict phase isn't even as bad as the withdrawal phase. The withdrawal phase really means I don't care anymore. You know, in the conflict phase, I'm still fighting. It still matters to me. But when you hit the withdrawal phase, it's like, you know what, I don't care anymore. I'm not even going to fight about this anymore. Now, the only way to get back to intimacy from withdrawal is to go back through conflict. There's no way around it. You have to go through it. Whatever it was, the issues and how they were handled that pushed you apart, you're going to have to go right back through that stuff in order to get back. That's why a lot of people don't want to make the journey, because they know it's going to be hard. They're going to have to deal with their issues. They're going to have to own their stuff. There's going to have to be resolution of the conflict. But you can get back to it, and you need to get back to it. You need to get back to intimacy because it's that emotional compatibility that's so important